Okay, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. As a lot of people who listen to the show regularly know, I like to kind of scour the internet trying to find local artists that are new to me and are doing things that are new and interesting and different. And I think I definitely have one of those artists on the show today. I think the best way to start things off would be for you to just introduce yourself and give a bit of background about what it is that you do. And I have lots of questions about what you do, but just in your own words, how would you sort of describe your music? And yeah.
All right. Hi, my name is Amanda Forrest. I am a clarinetist born and raised here in Winnipeg. Most of my music started out in the more conventional stream of wind band and more classical chamber music. And suddenly the pandemic hit and I couldn't really do a lot of live performances anymore with the Winnipeg Wind Ensemble and any plan for any other chamber music or solo concerts. So yeah, I recently started doing some exploration with electronics and improvisation that I've been sort of wanting to get into. And yeah, so occasionally at times I will do a lot of audio recordings. Well, for the past 2 years, that's mostly what I've been doing. Yeah, I recently released an EP with record called Paint Chip Prompts, which involve a lot of the titles of the pieces are names of paint chips from the paint company Behr,
Okay.
who you can find at Home Depot. This was sort of inspired by a project I did in my undergrad. I did music education, and one of my education course was just kind of centered around coming up with creative activities to help teach lessons. And
Okay.
we did some sort of icebreaker with paint chips, I think, but I had an idea. It's like, it would be really cool if you could kind of use the name of the paint chip colors as kind of a prompt
Yeah.
for any kind of artistic project, whether it's having to write a story or.
Well, it's a cool idea. I mean, it's definitely an unusual way to approach, I guess, coming up with music. I mean, a lot of people use prompts and use themes and topics, but paint chips, it's you're going to get something very different, I think, than if you use something more conventional for
Yeah, for
prompting.
sure. Yeah, and this is an activity I've also would like to encourage any artist to do of any medium. So
Yeah, yeah, for
just to
sure.
kind of spice things up a little bit and get your brain kind of working.
Well, I was gonna ask if it was a pandemic project, because I mean it makes sense that it is something you worked on over these past couple of years, because I think everyone's sort of found different ways to cope with being locked down or being unable to do their traditional artistic pursuits, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so you have to find new ways to approach things. But
Mhm.
I guess, like, just to rewind a bit from this, why the clarinet? And I don't mean to be insulting towards clarinets or clarinetists, but it's not an instrument that I see being used a lot anywhere really in kind of more contemporary music, right? I mean, it almost seems like it's a relic from a former era. And again, I don't mean that as an insult, but it
Oh
seems to
no.
be, to me anyway, I associate it with a time and place and genre, a couple of genres, and then that's about it. I haven't really heard a lot of new clarinet music. So what is the appeal of that instrument to you?
Okay. Well, I've been playing the clarinet since I was age. Yeah, I started when I was 12.
Okay.
Started in grade 7 at Elmwood High School Band, and I really liked sticking to the instrument. And I've always been into music. I've always been sort of a theater kid, and I did have kind of a soft spot of orchestral music and a lot of wind music.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a band director who was very supportive of that. I was lucky to have very supportive parents. And I eventually decided I wanted to go study music in university and see what I could do about music. And I was encouraged to become a music educator, and occasionally I still am, but I did toy with the idea of clarinet performance, and I still do. Through my university studies, I've also been sort of exposed to newer music and a
Sure.
lot of the more unconventional. There's a lot of stuff for clarinet and electronics out there that is composed.
That's
So
awesome. That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear the clarinet is not some dusty old relic like I'm picturing, right?
no,
It's
it's not some dusty old relic for sure. We even have there is an association for the clarinet called the International Clarinet Association, and they have a festival called Clarinet Fest that
okay.
goes on every year in a specific city in the States, or sometimes it can be somewhere in Europe, but yeah, and it's just sort of this opportunity for a lot of clarinetists to come together and either perform and showcase new pieces, or present lectures or workshops on research that they've been doing.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff there. I was really lucky to play some pieces performed for me composed for me over at a virtual rendition of the festival in 2021. So that was fun. But
And that's obviously
yeah,
due to the pandemic, right? To having to do it online.
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Am I wrong in that impression of clarinet kind of being a dated instrument though? I mean, I obviously you're immersed in the world of it, right? But I mean, compared
Yeah.
to say something like the saxophone, right, which is not that different. It's used so much more in contemporary genres of music. Like, I mean, there's maybe 35, 40 genres of music you can point to that are popular and mainstream, even that use a saxophone or a trumpet, or I mean, even string instruments. Even you can have a violin or a fiddle or a cello, and it seems like all these, the clarinet. And again, I'm not trying to shit on the clarinet because it's a cool.
Oh, I
It's,
know, absolutely.
but yeah, it is. I mean, is that kind of the perception that you think a lot of people might have about the instrument?
I think a lot of, especially young people, will have that conception for sure. Believe it or not, there's a lot of stuff out there that can really showcase the clarinet and the cool sounds it has.
Yeah. Well, I think you've done that with this record too. I mean, like,
Yeah, thank you.
where does the electronic side of things come in then? I mean, do you have a background in making electronic music as well?
I actually, the electronics is something that's kind of was also born from the pandemic.
Okay.
And how I've kind of started creating that has kind of expanded a little bit. Um, so when I started incorporating electronic sounds, I have this little tiny Yamaha keyboard that I've kind of been holding on to that has a lot of bizarre sounds. And I first started with using that and combining it with Audacity effects.
Okay.
And more recently, when where I started doing more of my own sort of improvised stuff was during the pandemic. There was a festival, online festival that was created in response to a lot of the sort of musical workshops and stuff being shut down, called Z Festival, created by Peter Trevor and Shoshana Klein, who are musicians based out in the States. And I think Shoshana did her master's in oboe performance over in McGill, but I think she's originally from the States initially. But I had a friend of mine, flautist, took part in their first festival during the summer of 2020. And she had a really great time, and I saw all of the really cool things. I watched a lot of the concerts. It's like, that's actually really cool. And sure enough, they ended up having sort of a fall program called the Unacademy that went on for 2 months. And I applied for it and got in, and we were challenged to try to experiment with certain things and sort of create our own individual piece of multimedia. Initially, it was for musicians, but it kind of ended up becoming for expanding their artist mediums a little bit. There was some visual arts. I know there was a theater artist as well. But yeah, I got to meet a lot of really interesting people all over the world. And yeah, I started out with doing an set of improvisations involving kind of doing weird effects to my voice in certain things, and just kind of being able to put my keyboard sounds to use.
Okay.
Shortly after that, I switched to Reaper rather than Audacity, just because it was recommended by the a couple of the faculty involved in the festival, and I explored a little more about getting a MIDI cable for my keyboard so I could use it as input.
Okay.
And I found a sort of free synth plugin called Surge that has a bunch of different sort of synth presets and a lot of really cool effects. And so I get most of my sounds from that. And yeah, I've started to combine, I've sort of started to create more pieces like that and just kind of do a lot of that for fun. Yeah, and occasionally I'll also do some multi-tracking covers of things. I am a little bit of a gamer at heart, mostly a casual gamer, and I've made a couple of covers either with a friend or by myself of certain video games.
Okay.
I have a National Park from Pokemon Gold and Silver cover that's starting to gain a little bit of traction. Yeah,
Well,
most of.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, continue.
I was going to say, like, I'm wondering if this whole you know, adventure into electronics and into this more improvisational, more kind of unusual sounds you're making with your instrument, has that opened you up to potentially new audiences? I mean, the video game thing, obviously that makes sense. You're reaching people who are in that community, which is huge, right? And there's people who know that music extremely well and are probably out there looking for covers of it. But then just in Winnipeg, in terms of, I mean, I know that, you know, shows have only recently started happening again because of the pandemic and everything, but does this kind of give you inroads into maybe more of the experimental music or even electronic music communities here in the city?
I guess it kind of slowly is giving me a lot more interest. I don't know if I really necessarily have an audience for that stuff. I'm just really having a lot of fun, and it's kind of just been a really important outlet for me since I haven't had a lot of live performances. And I'm hoping that'll change within this coming year. But yeah,
do you have the bug for this now, though? Like, is this something you want to be doing more of now that you've kind of experienced it a bit?
You know, I'd like to do more of it. I consider myself more of an arranger than a composer, but I'm thinking about maybe doing a bit more structurally composed things. Actually with paint chip prompts. Most of my stuff, before paint chip prompts, I usually would just plunk a lot of the electronic sounds through the keyboard. But I ended up kind of programming some of the motives, like the ones you hear in Stiletto Love, you know, dun 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 dun, dun and in Dangerously Elegant, dun da 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 da. Those really sort of steady motives where I ended up programming them into a notation software, exported them to MIDI, and then just sort of put them into the synth.
Oh, cool.
Just because I'm not actually a keyboardist by any means, and there's a small delay on my synth, and it kind of gets my fingers kind of flutzed up. So,
what is the process for playing this kind of stuff live? I mean, you know, I'm assuming you're doing this solo. So, if you were going to do a show where you were doing strictly the type of stuff that's on that record, how would you do it? What is sort of the setup there? Because it would be improvised, I assume, right?
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of there'd be, I think I'd probably program the electronics beforehand just to make sure I'd have them ready.
Yeah.
I'd probably try to see what kind of effects would go really well with the electronics using my effects pedal, which was a lot of what I used.
Okay.
In the records. But yeah, more than anything, I just try to make sure to plan what kind of sounds I'd have beforehand. And then what I like to do, and this is something I'm experimenting more with from one of the iterations of Z Festival that I attended, is just kind of setting a kind of tiny little limitations, limited to 3 sort of musical concepts I can do with the clarinet. Like maybe I'll play on a certain scale. I'll only play like trills or tremolos, or maybe I'll okay, I'm going to do bursts of flutter tonguing, or maybe I'm just going to play only in the low part of the instrument.
Okay.
3 or 2 things, and trying to trying to structure a piece, the clarinet stuff around that.
Does that make it, is that just to give yourself more of a challenge, like knowing that you have that limited amount of space to create with?
Yeah, and in some ways, yeah, just kind of giving more of a challenge, but also just kind of just so I don't have these moments where I kind of freeze up. It's just like, okay, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it helps me think on the fly a little more as well.
That makes sense for sure. I mean, especially if you're doing it solo as well, right? You want to
Yeah,
you don't want to end up stuck somewhere where you can't find an easy way or an obvious way to get out of it, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So if the pandemic wasn't happening, I mean, I know it seems like it's hopefully maybe wrapping up soon, but I mean, if we were in the normal before times right now, what would you be doing as a musician? Like, what would be sort of a typical year for you that
Well,
isn't interrupted by this?
um, well, it's hard to kind of say what a typical year would be for me, just because my first year after my master's degree in clarinet performance was being back here in Winnipeg,
Okay.
and the year after that, the pandemic had sort of hit when I was starting to get more of those opportunities. But what I will say is usually I play with the Winnipeg Wind Ensemble, which is sort of like our local professional Winnipeg ensemble. It's community based. We usually put on around 4 or 5 concerts a year. We're actually doing one on August 30th. It's a concert on the
Cool.
lawn. So over at over I can't remember the details, but I'll have to look into that soon. But yeah, but yeah, so there's Winnipeg Wind Ensemble. Sometimes I try to go for like one big thing per year. I'm really hoping I can try to get into I'm trying to apply for Clarinet Fest 2023 in Denver, Colorado, but we'll
Oh,
see
cool.
if that comes to anything. I really would like to perform live because it really wasn't the same kind of experience.
Well, yeah. How
Uh,
could it be, right? Because it's
yeah,
everything has been strange because of this. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, aside from that, I am also a music educator. I'm a substitute music teacher, and I teach in a couple of school divisions in Winnipeg.
Cool.
And occasionally, I've come into different schools. Teachers will ask me to teach a clarinet sectional to their kids. I'm actually teaching at a band camp
Awesome.
next week, so I'm really excited for that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. What has the reception been to this record? I mean, like I said, I kind of stumbled upon it and I was like, oh, this is really cool and different and something that I've never heard before. But I assume that a lot of people who've heard it are people you know and people who are maybe more,
Mostly just people I know. I don't
yeah.
think a lot of people have really sort of found it.
Well, hopefully this helps. Hopefully this helps to get the word
Yeah,
about it. Yeah, yeah.
I really appreciate you asking me to be on. I'm really flattered that you liked it. But yeah, I'm hoping I can reach out to more. Hoping maybe people will really enjoy it and maybe start listening to it more.
What
Yeah.
what's the best way, I guess, at this point to hear it? I mean, I found it on Bandcamp. I know it's obviously there. Where would you encourage people to go if they want to check it out
Yeah.
and check out your other stuff too?
Yeah, if you have a couple of different choices. So Bandcamp is obviously the big one. That's where I first dropped it. But I recently uploaded it to YouTube and SoundCloud. You can find a lot of my stuff there. Bandcamp, that's a lot of sort of my improv stuff. But YouTube has a couple of my video game covers and a lot of some of the previous live performances I've had, both in my university years and ones that I've organized.
Okay.
And SoundCloud has very similarly what my Bandcamp does.
Cool, cool. So it's mostly the improv stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then
And
what's the
video
best way? Right, the video games, yeah. What's the best way to find out more information about what you're doing as far as potential upcoming shows? I mean, the good thing about this being a podcast is someone could hear it
Yeah.
right when it comes out, or they could hear it a year from now, and maybe by then you have new music out and new things happening. So, where should they go online to find your
Yeah.
information?
If they want to find information about what I do and a little bit more about me, they can go to my website, which is amandaforestclarinet.com. Yeah.
Cool. Okay,
It-
awesome. Well, yeah, I'm glad we could do this because, like I said, I mean, this is kind of a I've been doing not that I'm an expert on music in any sense, but I've been doing this for like more than 9 years now, and I've talked to so many different types of artists. But clarinet, for some reason, has never come up. I've had people who play all kinds of instruments, and I mean, electronic artists. There's loads of those in Winnipeg, and people have been doing similar things, but not with the clarinet. So it's very cool to first of all hear your record and get you on the show, because it's nice to find something new when I'm talking to punk bands twice a week for years. And nothing against punk bands, I love them, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I guess what you're doing, it kind of has a punk rock aesthetic to it as well, in the sense of
for sure.
not sonically, but just the way you're improvising and making some noise that is
a
not
lot
intended.
of noise stuff.
Yeah,
I have I have a lot of friends who are in the DIY punk scene. Well, not a lot, but a couple of them, and that's a lot of fun.
Well, and it's always nice to see that too, regardless of what type of art it is, when people are approaching it that way, and approaching it in sort of this way where there are no rules, and you can do it on your own, and you don't have to, everything is kind of out the window, and it's a clean slate. You can sort of just do whatever comes out of your brain. So
it's really amazing. The friend who introduced me to Z Festival, she's a flautist. That's how I've kind of known her, but she's expanded back to visual art, which is something she's apparently done in the background. And she's created this sort of series based off of her synesthesia.
Okay,
and it's
cool.
Absolutely beautiful.
What is her name?
Shannon K. Lewis.
Cool.